All right, good morning, everybody. This is, we're starting with Vishnu Purana, Book 5, Chapter 21. So we ended off just with the story of Krishna slaying the evil king Kansa and setting free his imprisoned parents, Devaki and Vasudeva, and had his first reunion and conversation with them, in which he temporarily revealed to them his true nature as Bhagavan, temporarily suspending their perception of him as their son. Having permitted to Devaki and Vasudeva an interval of true knowledge through the contemplation of his actions, Hari again spread the delusions of his power over them and the tribe of Yadu. He said to them, "Mother, venerable father, you have both been long observed by Sankarsana and myself with sorrow and in fear of Kansa. He whose time passes not in respect to his father and mother is a vile being who descends in vain from virtuous parents. The lives of those produce good fruit, who reverence their parents, their gurus, the Brahmins, and the gods. Pardon, therefore, Father, the impropriety of which we may have been culpable, in resenting without your orders, to which we acknowledge that we are subject, the oppression we suffered from the power and violence of Kansa." Thus speaking, they offered homage to the elders of the Yadu tribe in order, and then in a suitable manner paid their respects to the citizens. The wives of Kansa and those of his father then surrounded the body of the king lying on the ground and bewailed his fate in deep affliction. Hari in various ways expressed his regret for what had chanced and endeavored to console them, his own eyes being suffused with tears. The foe of Madhu, that being a translation of Madhusudana or Krishna, then liberated Ugrasena from confinement, Ugrasena being the rightful Raja of the Yadus, and placed him on the throne, which the death of his son had left vacant. The chief of the Yadavas, being crowned, performed the funeral rites of Kansa and of the rest of the slain. When the ceremony was over, and Ugrasena had resumed his royal seat, Krishna addressed him and said, "Sovereign Lord, command boldly what else is to be done. The curse of Yayati has pronounced our race unworthy of dominion, but with me for your servant, you may issue your orders to the gods. How should kings disobey them?" Krishna is here referring to an ancient curse of the line of Yadu, that they would never have dominion over the earth. Which is why they are kind of a small border tribe with just like a couple of cities living in a wooded part of the country, and not on a par with the great kingdoms of Hastinapura and Magadha, which at this time dominate most of India. Thus, having spoken, Keshava summoned mentally the deity of the wind, who came on the instant. And Krishna said to him, "Go, Vayu, to Indra, and desire him to lay aside his pomp and resign to Ugrasena his splendid hall, Sudharman. Tell him that Krishna commands him to send the royal hall, the unrivaled gem of princely courts, for the assemblage of the race of Yadu." Accordingly, Vayu went and delivered the message to the husband of Shachi, who immediately gave up to him the hall Sudharman, and Vayu conveyed it to the Yadavas, the chiefs of whom thenceforth possessed this celestial court, emblazoned with jewels and defended by the arm of Govinda. The two excellent Yadu youths, meaning of course Krishna and Balarama, versed in all knowledge and possessed of all wisdom, then submitted to instruction as the disciples of their guru. So it's saying that though they were already versed in all knowledge and possessed of all wisdom, they submitted to instruction as disciples of a guru, so as to enact and model the correct dharma for others. Accordingly, they repaired to Sandipani, the Guru Sandipani, who, though he had been born in Kashi, did not live there anymore, but resided at Avanti, to study the Dhanurveda, or the science of arms, the martial arts. And becoming his pupils, were obedient and attentive to their master, exhibiting an example to all men of the observance of instituted rules. In the course of 64 days, they had gone through the elements of military science with the treatises on the use of arms and directions for the mystic incantations which secure the aid of supernatural weapons. They read through the Dhanurveda texts which treat of military matters, with the Rahasya, the mystical part, and the Sangraha, the collection or compendium. They particularly specialized in the Astra Prayoga, the employment of weapons. Sandipani, astonished at such proficiency that they mastered it all so quickly, and knowing that it exceeded human faculties, that no human could have done this, imagined that the sun and moon had become his students. When they had acquired all that he could teach, they said to him, "Now say what present shall be given to you as the Guru Dakshina, the gift to the Guru." The prudent Sandipani, perceiving that they were endowed with far more than mortal powers, requested them to give him back his dead son, drowned long before in the sea off Prabhasa. Prabhasa is a place of pilgrimage in the west of India on the coast of Gujarat, near the ancient temple of Somanatha. It's also called Somatirtha. So called because Somadeva was once freed there by Shiva from a curse. And so Soma personally built a great temple of Shiva, one of the very greatest temples of Shiva, the Somanatha temple at Prabhasa. And so Sandipani's son, presumably there on pilgrimage to that temple, entered the ocean for some reason and drowned. Taking up their arms, they marched to the ocean, but the all-comprehending sea said to them, "I have not killed the son of Sandipani. A demon named Panchajana, who lives in the form of a conch shell, seized the boy. He is still under my waters." On hearing this, Krishna plunged into the sea, and having slain the vile demon Panchajana, he took the conch shell, which was formed of the demon's bones, the sound of which fills demon hosts with dismay, animates the vigor of the gods, and annihilates unrighteousness. The heroes also recovered the boy from the domain of death, from Yamaloka, since the boy had indeed died, but they resurrected him from the dead, and restored him in his former person to his father. Rama and Janardana then returned to Mathura, which was well presided over by Ugrasena, and abounded in a happy population both of men and women, or in other words, a population in which both men and women were happy. Chapter 22. Parashara said, Parashara, our narrator of the entire Purana, the mighty Kansa had married the two daughters of Jarasandha, one named Asti, the other Prapti. Jarasandha was king of Magadha and a very powerful prince. When he heard that Krishna had killed his son-in-law, he was much incensed, and collecting a large force, marched against Mathura, determined to put the Yadavas and Krishna to the sword. Accordingly, he besieged the city with 23 divisions of his forces. Rama and Janardana sallied from the town with a slender but resolute force, and fought bravely with the armies of Magadha. The two youthful leaders prudently resolved to have recourse to their ancient weapons, and accordingly the bow of Hari, with 2 quivers filled with exhaustless arrows, and the mace called Kaumodaki, and the plowshare of Balabhadra, as well as the club Saunanda, descended at their wish from heaven. Armed with these weapons, they speedily discomfited the king of Magadha and his hosts, and re-entered the city in triumph. Although the wicked king of Magadha, Jarasandha, was defeated, yet Krishna knew that whilst he escaped alive, he was not subdued, and in fact he soon returned with a mighty force, and was again forced by Rama and Krishna to retreat. 18 times did the haughty prince of Magadha renew his attack upon the Yadavas, headed by Krishna, and was as often defeated and put to the rout by them, with very inferior numbers. That the Yadavas were not overpowered by their foes was owed to the present might of the portion of the discus-armed Vishnu. It was the Leela of the Lord of the universe, in his capacity of man, to launch various weapons against his enemies. For what effort of power to annihilate his foes could be necessary to him whose fiat creates and destroys the world? But as subjecting himself to human customs, he formed alliances with the brave and engaged in hostilities with the base. He had recourse to the 4 devices of policy, or negotiation, presence, sowing dissension, and chastisement, and sometimes even betook himself to flight. Thus imitating the conduct of human beings, the Lord of the Will pursued at will his sports. Chapter 23. Parashara said, Shyala, having called Gargya the Brahmin whilst at the cow pens impotent in an assembly of the Yadavas, they all laughed, at which he was highly offended, and repaired to the shores of the western sea, where he engaged in arduous penance to obtain a son who should be a terror to the tribe of Yadu. Propitiating Mahadeva and living upon iron sand for 12 years, the deity at last was pleased with him and gave him the desired boon. The king of the Yavanas, who was childless, became the friend of Gargya, and as the latter begot a son by his wife, who was as black as a bee, the son was as black as a bee, and was thence called Kala Yavana, or the Black Yavana. Yavanas meaning literally Greeks, referring to people far dwelling in lands far to the west. The Yavana king, having placed his son, whose breast was as hard as the point of the thunderbolt, upon the throne, retired to the woods. Inflated with conceit of his prowess, Kala Yavana demanded of Narada who were the most mighty heroes on earth, to which the sage answered the Yadavas. Accordingly, Kala Yavana assembled many myriads of mlechas and barbarians, and with a vast armament of elements, cavalry, chariot, and foot, advanced impatiently against Mathura and the Yadavas, wearying every day the animals that carried him, but insensible of fatigue himself. When Krishna knew of his approach, he reflected that if the Yadavas encountered the Yavana, they would be so much weakened by the conflict that they would be overcome by the king of Magadha. But their force was much reduced by the war with Magadha, whilst that of Kala Yavana was unbroken, and that the enemy might be therefore victorious. Thus the Yadavas were exposed to a double danger. He resolved, therefore, to construct a citadel for the Yadu tribe that should not be easily taken, one that even women might defend, and in which, therefore, the heroes of the house of Vishnu should be secure. One in which the male combatants of the Yadavas should dread no peril, though he himself should be drunk or careless, asleep or abroad. Thus reflecting, Krishna solicited a space of 12 furlongs from the ocean, and there he built the city of Dwaraka, defended by high ramparts, and beautified with gardens and reservoirs of water, crowded with houses and buildings, and splendid as the capital of Indra, the celestial city of Amaravati. Thither Janardana conducted the inhabitants of Mathura, and then awaited at that city the approach of Kala Yavana. When the hostile army encamped round Mathura, which had just been evacuated, Krishna unarmed went forth and beheld the Yavana king Kala Yavana, the strong-armed, recognizing Vasudeva, beheld the Yadava king Kala Yavana, the strong-armed, recognizing Vasudeva, pursued him whom the thoughts of perfect ascetics cannot overtake. Thus pursued, Krishna entered a large cavern where Mutukunda, a king of men, was asleep. The rash Yavana, entering the cave and beholding a man lying asleep there, concluded it must be Krishna, since he saw him only in the dark, and kicked him, at which Muchukunda awoke, and casting on him an angry glance, the Yavana was instantly consumed by fire and reduced to ashes. For in a battle between the gods and demons, Muchukunda had formerly contributed to the defeat of the demons, and being overcome with sleep, he solicited of the gods as a boon that he should enjoy a long repose. Sleep long and soundly, said the gods, and whoever disturbs you shall be instantly burnt to ashes by the fire emanating from your body. Having thus burnt up the iniquitous Yavana, and beholding the foe of Madhu, Muchukunda asked him who he was. I am born, Krishna replied, in the lunar race in the tribe of Yadu, and am the son of Vasudeva. Muchukunda, recollecting the prophecy of old Garga, and thus realizing just from that information who exactly Krishna really was, fell down before the Lord of all, Hari, saying, You are known, Supreme Lord, to be a portion of Vishnu, for it was said of old by Garga that at the end of the 28th Dvapara Yuga, Hari would be born in the family of Yadu. You are he, without doubt, the benefactor of humankind. For thy glory I am unable to endure. Thy words are of deeper tone than the muttering of the rain cloud, and earth sinks down beneath the pressure of thy feet. As in the battle between the Devas and Asuras, the Asuras were unable to sustain my luster, so even am I incapable of bearing thy radiance. You alone are the refuge of every living being who has lighted on the world. Do you, who are the alleviator of all distress, show favor upon me, and remove from me all that is evil. You are the oceans, the mountains, the rivers, the forests. You are the earth, sky, air, water, and fire. You are mind, intelligence, the unevolved principle, or unmanifest principle, the vital airs, the Lord of life, the soul, all that is beyond the soul, the all-pervading, exempt from the vicissitudes of birth, devoid of sensible properties, sound, and the like. In other words, that which cannot be perceived by the senses. Undecaying, illimitable, imperishable, subject neither to increase nor diminution. You are that which is Brahman, without beginning or end. From you the immortals, the Prajapatis, the Yakshas, Gandharvas, and Kinnaras, the Siddhas, the Apsaras, humans, animals, birds, deer, reptiles, and all the vegetable world proceed, and all that has been or will be or is now, movable or fixed. All that is amorphous or has form, all that is subtle, gross, stable, or movable, you are, O Creator of the world, and beside you there is not anything. O Lord, I have been whirled round in the cycle of worldly existence forever and have suffered the three classes of affliction, and there is no rest whatever. I have mistaken pains for pleasures, like sultry vapors for a pool of water, and their enjoyment has yielded me nothing but sorrow. The earth, dominion, forces, treasures, friends, children, wife, dependents, all the objects of the senses have I possessed, imagining them to be sources of happiness. But I found that in their changeable nature, O Lord, they were nothing but vexation. The Devas themselves, though high in heaven, were in need of my alliance. Where then is everlasting repose? Who, without adoring you, who are the origin of all worlds, shall attain, O supreme deity, that rest which endures forever? Beguiled by thy delusions and ignorant of thy nature, men, after suffering the various penalties of birth, death, and infirmity, behold the countenance of the Bhutaraja, the king of ghosts, and suffer in Naraka dreadful tortures, the reward of their own deeds. Addicted to sensual objects, through thy delusions I revolve in the whirlpool of selfishness and pride, and hence I come to you as my final refuge, who are the Lord deserving of all homage, than whom there is no other asylum. My mind afflicted with repentance for my trust in the world, and desiring the fullness of felicity, emancipation from all existence. Chapter 24. Thus praised by the wise Muchukunda, the sovereign of all things, the eternal Lord Hari, said to him, Go to whatever celestial regions you wish, Lord of men, possessed of might irresistible, honored by my favor. When you have fully enjoyed all heavenly pleasures, you shall be born in a distinguished family, retaining the recollection to your former births, and in that birth you shall finally obtain emancipation. Having heard this promise, and prostrated himself before Achyuta, the Lord of the world, Muchukunda went forth from the cave, and beholding men of diminutive stature, at that time first knew that the Kali Yuga had arrived, since he went to sleep. Now, the Kali Yuga had not technically arrived. What is meant here is that they were deep into the Dvapara Yuga Sandhyancha, the closing twilight of the Dvapara Yuga, in which the qualities of Kali Yuga start to blend into the world. So that's what's meant here by the Kali Yuga had arrived. Technically, the transition point from Dvapara to Kali was still about 100 years out. The king therefore departed to Gandhamadana, the shrine of Naranarayana, to perform penance. Krishna, having by this stratagem destroyed his enemy, Kalayavana, returned to Mathura and took captive Kalayavana's army, rich in horses, elephants, and cars, which, in other words, surrendered to him. Their horses, elephants, and chariots he conducted to Dvaraka and delivered to Ugrasena, and the Yadu race was relieved from all fear of invasion due to the destruction of Kalayavana and the extreme defensibility of the sea fort of Dvaraka. Baladeva, when hostilities had entirely ceased, being desirous of seeing his kinsmen, went back to Nanda's cow pens in Vrindavana. And there again he conversed with the herdsmen and their women with affection and respect. By some, the elders, he was embraced. Others, the juniors, he embraced. And with those of his own age, male and female, he talked and laughed. The cowherds made many kind speeches to Halayudha. Halayudha is one of Balarama's many names. But some of the gopis spoke to him with the affectation of anger, or with feelings of jealousy, as they inquired after the loves of Krishna with the women of Mathura. Is all well with the fickle and inconstant Krishna, said they. Does that volatile swain, the friend of an instant, amuse the women of the city by laughing at our rustic efforts? Does he ever think of us, singing in chorus to his songs? Will he not come here once again to see his mother? But why talk of these things? It is a different tale to tell for him without us, and for us without him. Father, mother, brother, husband, kin, what have we not abandoned for his sake? But he is a monument of ingratitude. Yet tell us, does not Krishna talk of coming here? Falsehood is never, O Krishna, to be uttered by you. Verily, this is Damodara, this is Govinda, who has given up his heart to the damsels of the city, who has no longer any regard for us, but looks upon us with disdain. So saying, the gopis, whose minds were fixed on Krishna, addressed Rama in his place, calling him Damodara and Govinda, and they laughed and were merry. And Rama consoled them by communicating to them agreeable, modest, affectionate, and gentle messages from Krishna. With the cowherds, he talked mirthfully, as he had been wont to do, and rambled along with them over the lands of Raja. Chapter 25. Whilst the mighty Shesha, the upholder of the globe, of whom Balarama is avatar, was thus engaged in wandering amidst the forests with the herdsmen in the disguise of a mortal, having already rendered great services to earth and still considering what more was to be achieved, Varuna, in order to provide for his recreation, said to his wife, Varuni, the goddess of wine, you, Madira, so Varuni, of course, she is so called as the wife of Varuna. Her actual name is Madira. He says to her, you, Madira, are ever acceptable to the powerful Ananta. Go there, meaning that he loves wine. Go, therefore, auspicious and kind goddess, and promote his enjoyments. Obeying these commands, Varuni went and established herself in the hollow of a kadamba tree in the woods of Vrindavana. Baladeva, roaming about, came there, and smelling the pleasant fragrance of liquor, resumed his ancient passion for strong alcoholic drink. The holder of the plowshare, observing the vinous drops distilling from the kadamba tree, was much delighted, and gathered and quaffed them, along with the herdsmen and the gopis, whilst those who were skillful with voice and lute celebrated him in their songs. Being inebriated with the wine, and the drops of perspiration standing like pearls upon his limbs, he called out, not knowing what he said, "Come hither, Yamuna river, I want to bathe." The river, disregarding the words of a drunken man, came not at his bidding, on which Rama, in a drunken rage, took up his plowshare, which he plunged into her bank, and dragged her to him, in other words, digging a channel for the river water. Calling out, "Will you not come, you jade? Will you not come? Now go where you please, if you can." Thus saying, he compelled the dark river to quit its ordinary course, and follow him whithersoever he wandered through the wood, digging a channel for the water with his plow. Assuming a mortal figure, the form of a human or human-appearing woman, the Yamuna, with distracted looks, approached Balabhadra and entreated him to pardon her and let her go, but he replied, "I will drag you with my plowshare in 1,000 directions, since you condemn my prowess and strength." At last, however, appeased by her reiterated prayers, he let her go, after she had watered all the country. When he had bathed, the goddess of beauty, Lakshmi, came and gave him a beautiful lotus to place in one ear and an earring for the other, a fresh necklace of lotus flowers sent by Varuna, and garments of a dark blue color, as costly as the wealth of the ocean. And thus decorated, with a lotus in one ear, a ring in the other, dressed in blue garments and wearing a garland, Balarama appeared united with loveliness. Thus decorated, Rama sported for 2 months in Vraja, and then returned to Dwaraka, where he married Revati, the daughter of King Raivata, by whom he had 2 sons, Nishatta and Ulmuka. Chapter 26. At this time, Bhishmaka was king of Vidarbha, residing at the city of Kundina. Vidarbha is in the greater country of Berar, and that name of Berar, the territory, remains in the present city of Bedar, India. The ancient capital, Kundina, is still called Kundapur, still in modern India. Bhishmaka, the king there, had a son named Rukmin and a beautiful daughter named Rukmini. Krishna fell in love with the latter and solicited her in marriage, but her brother, who hated Krishna, would not assent to the espousals. At the suggestion to Jarasandha, and with the concurrence of his son, the powerful sovereign Bhishmaka arranged for Rukmini to marry Shishupala. In order to celebrate the nuptials, Jarasandha and other princes, the friends of Shishupala, assembled in the capital of Vidarbha, and Krishna, attended by Balabhadra and many other Yadavas, also went to Kundina, under the pretext of witnessing the wedding. When there, Hari contrived on the eve of the nuptials to carry off the princess, leaving Rama and his kinsmen to sustain the weight of his enemies, in other words, to fight off the pursuit of Krishna and Rukmini. Hondraka, the illustrious Dantavakra, Vidurata, Shishupala, Jarasandha, Shalya, and other kings, indignant at the insult, exerted themselves to kill Krishna, but were repelled by Balarama and the Yadavas. Rukmin, vowing that he would never enter the city of Kundina again until he had slain Keshava in fight, pursued and overtook him. In the combat that ensued, Krishna destroyed with his discus, as if in sport, the host of Rukmin, with all its horse and elephants and foot and chariots, and overthrew him, and hurled him on the ground, and would have put him to death, but was withheld by the entreaties of Rukmini. "He is my only brother," she exclaimed, "and must not be slain by you. Restrain your wrath, O divine Lord, and give me my brother in charity." Thus addressed by her, Krishna, whom no acts affect, spared Rukmin. And Rukmin, in pursuance of his vow never to re-enter his city, founded the new city of Bhojakarta, nearby Kundina in the kingdom of Vidarbha, situated on the banks of the Narmada River, and ever afterwards dwelt therein, never again returning to his home city of Kundina. After the defeat of Rukmin, Krishna married Rukmini in due form, having first made her his own by the Rakshasa ritual, or the Rakshasa mode of marriage, to abduct a bride and carry her off. She bore him the gallant son Pradyumna, a portion of the deity of love, an incarnation of Kamadeva. The demon Sambara carried him off, but he slew the demon. Chapter 27. Maitreya said, "How, Muni, happened it that the hero Pradyumna was carried away by Sambara, and in what manner was the mighty Sambara killed by Pradyumna?" Parashara replied, "When Pradyumna was but 6 days old, he was stolen from the lying-in chamber by Sambara, terrible as death, for the demon foreknew that Pradyumna, if he lived, would be his destroyer. Taking away the boy, Sambara cast him into the ocean, swarming with monsters, into a whirlpool of roaring waves, the haunt of the huge creatures of the deep. A large fish swallowed the child, but he died not, being an avatar himself of a deva, and was born anew from its belly. For that fish, along with others, was caught by fishermen and delivered by them to the great Asura Sambara, since Sambara evidently threw the boy into the ocean just off the coast of his own lair. Sambara's wife, Maya, whose name was Maya Devi, the mistress of his household, superintended the operations of the cooks and saw, when the fish was cut open, a beautiful child therein, looking like a new shoot of the blighted tree of love. Whilst wondering who this should be, and how he could have got into the belly of the fish, Narada came to satisfy her curiosity, and said to that graceful woman, "This is the son of him by whom the whole world is created and destroyed, the son of Vishnu, who was stolen by Sambara from the lying-in chamber and tossed by him into the sea, where he was swallowed by the fish. He is now in thy power. Do you, beautiful woman, tenderly rear this jewel of mankind." Thus counseled by Narada, Maya Devi took charge of the boy and carefully reared him from childhood, being fascinated with the beauty of his person. Her affection became still more impassioned when he was decorated with the bloom of adolescence, rather inappropriately being very Oedipal in her romantic affection for her own adopted son. The gracefully moving Mayati then, fixing her heart and eyes upon the high-minded Pradyumna, gave him, whom she regarded as herself. In other words, she felt so close to him that she didn't really regard him as a separate person from herself, all of her magic and elusive powers. Observing these marks of passionate affection, the son of Krishna said to the lotus-eyed Maya Devi, "Why do you indulge in feelings so unbecoming the character of a mother?" To which she replied, "You are not a son of mine. You are the son of Vishnu, whom Kala Sambara carried away and threw into the sea. You were swallowed by a fish, but were rescued by me from its belly. Thy fond mother, O beloved, is still weeping for you." When the valiant Pradyumna heard this, he was filled with wrath and defied Sambara to battle. In the conflict that ensued, that son of Madhava slew the whole host of Sambara. 7 times he foiled the delusions of the enchanter, and making himself master of the 8th enchantment, turned it against Sambara and killed him. In other words, defeating him in a duel of sorcery, having been taught the demon's own art of sorcery by his adopted mother, Mayavati. By the same faculty, he ascended into the air, in other words, again, by the magic arts that she had taught him, and proceeded to his father's house, where he alighted along with Mayavati, who flew there together with him, in the inner apartments of the palace of Dwaraka. When the women beheld Pradyumna, they thought it was Krishna himself. Rukmini, her eyes dimmed with tears, spoke tenderly with him, recognizing who he really was, and said, "Happy is she who has a son like this in the bloom of youth. Such would be the age of my son Pradyumna if he was alive. Who is the fortunate mother adorned by you? And yet from thy appearance, and from the affection I feel from you, you are assuredly my son by Hari." At this moment, Krishna, accompanied by Narada, arrived. And Narada said to the delighted Rukmini, "This is indeed your own son, who has come hither after killing Sambara, by whom, when an infant, he was stolen from the lying-in chamber. This is the virtuous Mayavati, his wife, and not the wife of Sambara. Hear the reason. When Manmata, the deity of love, had perished, this is back when Manmata is his actual name. Kamadeva, of course, is his title as the presiding deity of Kama. I'm referring to when he was burnt to death by Shiva. The goddess of beauty, Rati Devi, his wife, desirous to secure his revival, assumed a delusive form and by her charms fascinated the demon Sambara and exhibited herself to him in various illusory enjoyments. This thy son is the descended Kama, an avatar of Kama who took birth again. And this is the goddess Rati, his wife. There was no occasion for any uncertainty. This is thy daughter-in-law. Then Rukmini was glad, and Keshava also. The whole city resounded with exclamations of joy, and all the people of Dwaraka were surprised at Rukmini's recovering a son who had so long been lost. Chapter 28. Rukmini bore to Krishna these other sons: Charudeshna, Sudeshna, Charandeha, Sushena, Charugupta, Bhadracharu, Charuvinda, Sucharu, and the very mighty Charu. Also one daughter, Charumati. Krishna had 7 other beautiful wives: Kalindi, who is Yamuna, the goddess Yamuna; Mitravranda, the virtuous Nagnajiti, the queen Jambavanti, the bear queen; Rohini, of beautiful form, the amiable and excellent daughter of the king of Madra, Madri; Satyabhama, the daughter of Shatrajit; and Lakshmana, of lovely smiles. Besides these, he had 16,000 other wives. The heroic Pradyumna was chosen for her lord at her public choice of a husband by the daughter of Rukmin, and he had by her the powerful and gallant prince Aniruddha, who was fierce in fight, an ocean of prowess, and the tamer of his foes. Keshava demanded in marriage for him the granddaughter of Rukmin, and although the latter was inimical to Krishna, Rukmin was, he betrothed the maiden to the son of his own daughter. Upon the occasion of the nuptials, Rama and other Yadavas attended Krishna to Bhojakatta, the city of Rukmin. After the wedding had been solemnized, several of the kings, headed by him of Kalinga, the king of Kalinga, said to Rukmin, "This wielder of the plowshare is ignorant of the dice, which may be converted into his misfortune. Why may we not contend with him and beat him in play?" The potent Rukmin replied to them and said, "So let it be." And he engaged Balarama at a game of dice in the palace. Balarama soon lost to Rukmin 1,000 nishkas. Nishkas being a currency. He then staked and lost another 1,000, and then pledged 10,000, which Rukmin, who was well skilled in gambling, also won. At this, the king of Kalinga laughed aloud, and the weak and exulting Rukmin grinned and said, "Baladeva is losing, for he knows nothing of the game. Although blinded by a vain passion for play, he thinks he understands the dice." Halayudha, galled by the broad laughter of the Kalinga prince and the contemptuous speech of Rukmin, was exceedingly angry, and overcome with passion, increased his stake to 10 million nishkas. Rukmin accepted the challenge, and therefore threw the dice. Baladeva won, and cried aloud, "The stake is mine." But Rukmin called out as loudly that he was the winner. "Tell no lies, Bala," said he. "The stake is yours, that is true, but I did not agree to it. Although this be one to you, yet still I am the winner. A deep voice was then heard, and so this may be a little bit obscure. What it's saying is that they made a pledge, agreed to the pledge, rolled, somebody won several times. This time, Baladeva said 10 million nishkas through the dice. Rukmin is never said verbally that he accepted the pledge, threw the dice and lost, and is claiming that it didn't count because he never verbally agreed to it like he did to the others. A deep voice was then heard in the sky, inflaming still more the anger of the high-spirited Baladeva, saying, Bala has rightly won the whole sum, and Rukmin speaks falsely. Although he did not accept the pledge in words, he did so by his acts, having taken up and cast the dice. Balarama, thus excited, his eyes red with rage, started up and struck Rukmin with the board on which the game was played, and this blow killed him. Taking hold of the trembling king of Kalinga, he knocked out the teeth which he had shown when he laughed at him. Laying hold of a golden column, he dragged it from its place and used it as a weapon to kill those princes who had taken part with his adversaries. Upon which the whole circle, crying out with terror, took to flight and escaped from the wrath of Baladeva. When Krishna heard that Rukmin had been killed by his brother, he made no remark, being afraid of Rukmini on the one hand and of Bala on the other, or in other words, not wanting to take sides and displease either of them. But taking with him the newly wedded Aniruddha and the Yadava tribe, he returned to Dwaraka. Chapter 29. Shakra, the lord of the three worlds, came mounted on his fierce elephant Airavata to visit Shri at Dwaraka, Shri being one of the many names of Krishna, and Shakra being Indra. So this is Indra coming to Dwaraka to visit Krishna. Having entered the city and been welcomed by Hari, Indra related to that hero the deeds of the demon Naraka. By you, Madhusudana, lord of the gods, said Indra, in immortal condition, all sufferings have been soothed. Arishta, Dhenuka, Chanura, Mushtika, Keshin, who sought to injure helpless men, have all been slain by you. Kansa, Kuvalayapida, the child-destroying Putana, have been killed by you, and so have other oppressors to the world. By your valor and wisdom the three worlds have been preserved, and the gods, obtaining their share of the yajnas offered by the devout, enjoy satisfaction. But now hear the occasion on which I have come to you, and which you are able to remedy. The son of the earth, called Naraka, who rules over the city of Pragjyotisha, inflicts a great injury upon all creatures. Pragjyotisha is a city in the center of the country of Kamarupa, a Kirata kingdom in what today is Assam, in the far east of India. Carrying off the maidens of gods, saints, demons, and kings, he shuts them up in his own palace. He has taken away the umbrella of Varuna, impermeable to water, the jewel mountain crest of Mandara, and the celestial nectar-dropping earrings of my mother Aditi, and he now demands my elephant Airavata. I have thus explained to you, Govinda, the tyranny of the Asura. You can best determine how it is to be prevented. Having heard this account, the divine Hari gently smiled, and rising from his throne, took Indra by the hand. Then wishing for the eater of the serpents, which is a reference to Garuda, Garuda immediately appeared, upon whom his master, having first seated his wife Satyabhama upon Garuda's back, then Krishna also mounted and ascended, and together Krishna and his wife Satyabhama flew to Pragjyotisha. Indra mounted his elephant, and in sight of the inhabitants of Dwaraka, went back to the abode of the Devas. The environs of Pragjyotisha, the city of the demon Naraka, were defended by pashas, or binding weapons, constructed by the demon Muru, the edges of which were as sharp as razors. But Hari, throwing his discus Sudarshana amongst them, cut them to pieces. Essentially what that's describing is like coils of razor wire topping the walls. That's what Krishna cut his way through with his chakra. Then Muru started up, the demon Muru who had built that defense, but Keshava slew him and burnt his 7,000 sons like moths with the flame of the edge of his discus. Having slain the demons Muru, Hayagriva, and Panchajana, the wise Hari rapidly reached the city of Pragjyotisha. There a fierce conflict took place with the troops of Naraka, in which Govinda destroyed thousands of demons, and when Naraka himself came into the field, showering upon the deity all sorts of weapons, the wielder of the discus and annihilator of the demon tribe cut him in two with his celestial missile. Naraka being slain, Earth, or Bhumi Devi, bearing the two earrings of Aditi, approached the Lord of the world and said, "When, O Lord, I was upheld by you in the form of the boar, your contact with me then engendered this my son, Naraka. He whom you gave me has now been killed by you. Take therefore these two earrings and cherish his progeny. You, Lord, whose aspect is ever gracious, has come to this sphere in a portion of yourself to lighten my burden. You are the eternal creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe, the origin of all worlds and one with the universe. What praise can be worthily offered to you? You are the pervader and that which is pervaded, the act, the agent, and the effect, the universal spirit of all beings. What praise can be worthily offered to you? You are the abstract soul, the sentient and the living soul of all beings, the imperishable. But since it is not possible to praise you worthily, then why should the hopeless attempt proceed? Have compassion, O universal soul, and forgive the sins which Naraka has committed. Verily, verily, it is for the sanctification of thy son that he has been killed by you." The Lord, who is the substance of all creatures, having replied to her, "Even so," proceeded to redeem the various gems from the dwelling of Naraka that he had stolen and hoarded there. In the apartments of the women, he found 16,100 damsels taken captive and who had been enslaved by Naraka. He also beheld in the palace 6,000 large elephants, each having 4 tusks, 21 lakhs of horses of Kamboja and other excellent breeds. These Govinda dispatched to Dwaraka in charge of the servants of Naraka. The umbrella of Varuna, the jewel mountain, which he also recovered, he placed upon Garuda, and mounting him himself, and taking his wife Satyabhama with him, who had been with him on this entire adventure, he set off to the heaven of the Devas to restore the earrings of Aditi. Chapter 30. Garuda, laden with the umbrella of Varuna and the jewel mountain, and bearing Hrishikesha on his back — Hrishikesha is a name of Krishna — to the court of Indra, went lightly along as if in sport. In other words, it was easy for him to fly, even carrying a portion of a mountain on his back, such as Garuda's strength. When they arrived at the portals of Svarga, Hari blew his shell, on which the Devas advanced to meet him, bearing respectful offerings. Having received the homage of the Devas, Krishna went to the palace of the mother of the Devas, whose turrets resembled white clouds, and on beholding the goddess Aditi, paid his respects to her, along with Shakra, or Indra, who was also there, and presenting to her her own earrings, which had been stolen by Naraka and now recovered, informed her of the destruction of the demon Naraka. The mother of the world, well pleased, then fixed her whole thoughts upon Hari the Creator, and thus pronounced his praise. "Glory to you, O God with the lotus eyes, who removest all fear from those that worship you. You are the eternal, universal, and living soul, the origin of all beings, the instigator of the mental faculty and faculties of sense, one with the three gunas, beyond the three gunas, exempt from contraries, pure, existing in the hearts of all, void of color, extension, and every transient modification, unaffected by the vicissitudes of birth or death, sleep or waking. You are evening, night, and day, earth, sky, air, water, and fire, mind, intellect, and individuality. You are the agent of creation, duration, and dissolution, the master over the agent, in thy forms which are called Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. You are devas, yakshas, daityas, rakshasas, siddhas, punnagas, kushmandas, pishachas, gandharvas, humans, animals, deer, elephants, reptiles, trees, shrubs, creepers, climbers, and grasses. All things, large, middling, small, immense, or minute. You are all bodies whatsoever, composed of aggregated atoms. This thy illusion beguiles all who are ignorant of thy true nature, the fools who imagine themselves to be in that which is not spirit. The notions that I am, this is mine, which influence mankind, are but the delusions of the mother of the world, originating in thy active agency. Those who, attentive to their duties, diligently worship you, traverse all this illusion, and obtain spiritual freedom. Brahma and all the gods, humans, and animals are alike invested by the thick darkness of fascination in the gulf of the illusions of Vishnu. That men, who having worshipped you, should seek the gratification of their desires and their own preservation, this, O Lord, is also thy delusion. It is the sport of thy fascinations that induces men to glorify you, to obtain thereby the continuance of their race, or the annihilation of their enemies, instead of eternal liberation. It is the fault of the impure acts of the righteous to proffer such idle requests to one able to confer much more important benefits, like asking to a rag to cover one's nakedness from the kalpavriksha, the tree that would bestow whatever was asked of it. Be propitious then, imperishable author of all the error that deceives the world, and dispel, O Lord of all creatures, the conceit of knowledge which proceeds from ignorance. Glory to you, grasper of the discus, wielder of the bow, brandisher of the mace, holder of the shell. For such do I behold you in thy perceptible form, nor do I know that form of yours which is beyond perception. Have compassion on me, supreme God. Vishnu, thus hymned by Aditi, smiled and said to the mother of the Devas, Mother goddess, do you show favor unto me and grant me thy blessing? So be it, replied Aditi, ever as you will. And whilst you dwell amongst mortals, the first of men, you shall be invincible by gods or demons. Parashara said, Then Satyabhama, accompanied by the queen of Indra, addressed Aditi respectfully and solicited her benedictions. And Aditi in reply said to her, Fair-browed woman, you shall never suffer decay nor loss of beauty. You shall be the asylum of all loveliness, woman of faultless shade. With the assent of Aditi, Indra then respectfully saluted Janardana in all due form, and conducted him and Satyabhama through Nandana and other pleasant gardens of the Devas, where Keshava, the destroyer of Keshi, saw the Parijata tree, the favorite of Shachi, which was produced when the ocean was churned for the Amritam. Its bark was of gold, and it was embellished with young sprouting leaves of a copper color, and fruit stalks bearing numerous clusters of a fragrant fruit. When Satyabhama noticed this tree, she said to her beloved Lord Govinda, Why should not this divine tree be transported to Dwaraka? If what you say is true and I am really dear to you, then let this tree be taken away from hence and planted in the gardens of my dwelling. You have often said to me, Neither Jamavati nor Rukmini is so dear to me, Satya, as you are. If you have spoken the truth and not mere flattery, then let this Parijata tree be the ornament of my mansion. I long to shine amidst my fellow queens, wearing the flowers of this tree in the braids of my hair. Thus solicited by Satyabhama, Hari smiled upon her, and taking the Parijata plant, put it upon Garuda. The keepers of the garden remonstrated and said, This Parijata tree belongs to Shachi, the queen of the sovereign of the Devas. It is not proper, Govinda, for you to remove it. At the time when the ocean was churned for the beverage of immortality, this tree was produced for the purpose of providing Shachi with flowery ornaments. You cannot be suffered to depart with it. It is through ignorance that this is sought for by anyone, as it is the especial property of her on whose countenance the king of the Devas delights to look, and who shall go away with impunity who attempts to carry it off? Assuredly, the king of the Devas will punish this audacity, for his hand launches the thunderbolt, and the immortals attend upon his steps. Forbear then, Krishna, nor provoke the hostility of all the Devas. The wise will not commence actions that can be productive only of unpleasant consequences. Satyabhama, on hearing these words, was exceedingly offended and said, What right has Shachi, what has Indra to the Parijata tree? It was produced at the churning of the ocean as the common property of all worlds. Wherefore, Devas, should Indra alone possess it? In the same manner, guardians of the grove, as nectar, as the moon, as the goddess Shri herself, so the Parijata tree is the common property of all the world. And since Shachi, confiding in the strength of her husband's arm, would keep it to herself, away with submission to her, Satya takes away the tree. Go quickly, and let Paulomi be told what I have said. Paulomi is another name of Shachi. Repeat to her this contemptuous message from Satyabhama. If you are the beloved wife of your Lord, if your husband is obedient to your authority, let him prevent my husband from carrying off this tree. I know your husband Shakra, I know the sovereign of the Devas, and I who am immortal, take this Parijata tree away from you. Accordingly, the warders of the garden went and reported to Shachi the message of Satyabhama. Shachi appealed to her husband and excited the king of the Devas to resent this affront, and Indra accordingly, accompanied by the army of the Celestials, marched to attack Hari in defense of the Parijata tree. The Devas were armed with clubs, swords, maces, and darts, and Indra wielded the thunderbolt. As soon as Govinda saw the king of the Devas advancing against him on his elephant, attended by the immortals, he blew his shell so that the sound filled all the regions, and he showered, smilingly, myriads of arrows upon his assailants. Beholding the air in all directions overspread with his darts, the Celestials in return hurled innumerable missiles, but every one of these, Madhusudana, Lord of all worlds, cut playfully into 1,000 pieces with his shafts. The devourer of serpents, Garuda, laid hold of the noose of Varuna, the sovereign of the waters, and tore it to fragments with his beak as if it had been a little snake. The son of Devaki threw his mace at the club of Yama and cast it broken upon the ground. He cut in bits the litter of the Lord of Wealth, Kubera, with his discus. A glance of his eye eclipsed the radiance of the sun. He severed Agni into 100 parts with his arrows and scattered the Vasus through the realms of space. With his chakra he cut off the points of the tridents of the Rudras and cast themselves upon the earth. And with the shafts shot from his bow he dispersed the Sadhyas, Vishvas, Maruts, and Gandharvas like fleeces of cotton from the pods of the Simul tree through the sky. Garuda also diligently plied his beak and wings and nails and bit and bruised and scratched the deities who opposed his lord. Then the king of the Devas and Madhusudana encountered and overwhelmed each other with countless shafts like raindrops falling from 2 heavy clouds. Garuda in the conflict engaged with the elephant Airavata, and Janardana was opposed to all the Devas. When all the other weapons had been cut to pieces, Indra stood armed with his thunderbolt, and Krishna with the Sudarshana chakra. Beholding them thus prepared for fight, all the people of the 3 spheres exclaimed, Alas, alas! Indra launched his bolt, but in vain, for Hari caught and stopped it. He forbore, however, to hurl his discus in reply, and only called out to Indra to stay his hand. Satyabhama, seeing Indra disarmed and his elephant disabled by Garuda, the deity himself about to retreat, said to him, King of the triple spheres, it ill becomes the husband of Shachi to run away. Ornamented with Parijata garlands, she will approach you. Of what use is the sovereignty of heaven embellished with the Parijata tree, no longer beholding Shachi meet you with affection as of yore? Nay, Shakra, fly not. You must not suffer shame. Here, take the Parijata tree. Let the gods be no longer annoyed. Shachi, inflated with pride of her husband, has not welcomed me to her dwelling with respectful presence. As a woman, I am light of purpose and am anxious for my husband's fame. Therefore have I instigated this contest with you, Shakra. But I do not want the Parijata tree, nor do I wish to take that which is another's property. Shachi is proud of her beauty. What woman is not proud of her husband? Thus spoken to by Satyabhama, the king of the gods turned back and said to her, Desist, wrathful woman, from afflicting your friend by further reproaches. I am not ashamed of being vanquished by him who is the author of the creation, preservation, and destruction of the world, who is the substance of all things, in whom without beginning or middle the universe is comprised, and from whom and by whom, identical with all things, it proceeds and will cease to be. What disgrace is it, O goddess, to anyone to be discomfited by him who is the cause of creation, continuance, and dissolution? His form is the parent of all worlds, though infinitely subtle, and known to those only by whom all that may be known is known. Who is able to overcome the unborn, unconstituted eternal Lord, who has willed to become immortal for the good of the world? And I think that that is probably a good place for us to pause at the end of the chapter.
Amazing. Thanks, Davilo.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Could you, as quickly as humanly possible, paraphrase what just happened in that last chapter? It was kind of fast.
Yeah, yeah. Essentially that during their visit to Svarga, during the visit of Krishna and Satyabhama to Svarga, Satyabhama, while they toured the garden in Svarga, the heaven realm of Indra and the Devas, Satyabhama demanded that Krishna uproot a tree, the heavenly Parijata tree there, to take it home for her. And that this instigated a fight over the theft of the tree, which Krishna, of course, invincibly won, not killing anyone, but essentially fighting in play. And at the end of the whole thing, they basically talked it down and through diplomacy stopped fighting, and Satyabhama, not wanting to cause trouble, gave up her claim to the tree.
Okay, right. Wow. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you guys very much for coming. Jai Sri Krishna.
Thank you, Jai Shri Krishna.